Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Excellence Council Perspectives webinar. Today, we will dive into a very exciting topic, workforce readiness and institutional risk and financial services 2026. Today's session is eligible for HRCI, SHRM, and ATD professional development credits. Now let's meet today's speakers. First up, we have Scott Miller, the SVP Change and Technology Portfolio from Bank of America. We have Daniel Neubauer, HR Business Partner at UBS, and David Forey, SVP and Principal Analyst at Brennan Hall Group. Before we dive into today's content, let me tell you about Brennan Hall Group and some incredible opportunities that could accelerate your career. Brennan Hall Group is a leading professional development firm that has been serving learning, talent, and HR executives worldwide for more than 30 years. We've advanced the growth and performance of millions of employees and leaders through our cloud-based platform, delivering evidence-based research, data, and certification programs that empower organizations to achieve excellence in every area of human capital management. Our impact spans more than 10 million employees and executives globally, supported by our comprehensive research library, strategic insights, and prestigious awards program. Below is a sample of the organizations we are proud to partner with. We have incredible learning and networking opportunities, our two BRIC events happening later this year, our AI Summit on October 15th, and our Leadership Summit on November 17th and 18th of 2026. And don't forget to save the date for next year's 2027 HCM Excellence Conference happening January 26th through the 28th. All details for everything I've mentioned will be available in a PDF you'll receive within 24 hours after the webinar. I'm excited to share more about Brennan Hall Group's Excellence Awards, 4 prestigious programs recognizing organizational excellence. The HCM Awards honor innovation in training, learning, and HR. This program did just close last week, but don't you worry, we have 2 programs opening up on Monday. The Technology Awards recognize solution providers in learning, talent management, and workforce technologies. And our Education Technology Awards celebrate K-12, universities, and education associations transforming learning. Again, these open next Monday, April 20th, and the deadline is September 4th. Finally, the Excellence in Action Awards spotlight organizations of all sizes that prioritize employee voices and create people-centric cultures. The 2026 program will be launching in May. Whether you're an HR team, technology provider, educational institution, or organization committed to employee engagement, there's a Brennan Hall Group Award designed to recognize your achievements and elevate your reputation in the industry. Once again, don't forget to save those dates for our 2027 HCM Excellence Conference happening January 26th through the 28th. We hope to see you there. Now I'm going to launch a poll based on everything I just went over. We would like to know more what you're interested in. Is it our institute? Is it one of our awards programs? The 2027 HCM Excellence Conference? Or maybe it's one of our BRIC summits. I'll leave this open for just a few more seconds.
Well, perfect, Ivy. I know you're going to leave that up for a little bit more for people to fill out. I'm excited to kick things off. As Ivy mentioned, I'm a senior vice president here at Brennan Hall Group, and I'm joined by 2 wonderful speakers. And, you know, some of those commercials that you just heard from the Brennan Hall Group side, both of those apply to the 2 gentlemen that are joining me today. Both are multi-year award winners, several awards between for each year that they've applied, as well as past speakers at our HCM Excellence conferences in the past. So both of those extremely relevant for the group here today.
Thank you, David. And I know everyone's eager to get to the content. So just a few quick things to know. If you have any questions during the webinar, please use the questions panel on your control bar. We'll be answering them throughout the session. We're also recording today's webinar, and you'll receive an email within 24 hours with a link to the recording and a PDF of the slides. The chat box is open, so feel free to share your thoughts as we go along. Your input makes this more valuable to everyone. Now I would like to pass things over to our amazing panel.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ivy. As I mentioned, already shared my name. Would love, I don't want to do either one of you injustice by trying to introduce you. I've worked with each of you for several years and been able to interact and really enjoy your company. So would love to hear more about you, what you could share with the audience about your role. Scott, it looked like you came off mute first, so you can share first.
Okie dokie. Fantastic. Thank you, David. Appreciate the time and the ability to be here today. I'm Scott Miller. I'm with Bank of America. I am located just north of Charlotte, North Carolina, in a small town called Davidson. I have been with the bank for 38 years, and my entire journey, for the most part, has been in HR, in learning and leadership development roles. Presently, I serve as the Strategic Change and Transformation Executive for the Academy, where we look at innovative solutions and enhancing and expanding our capabilities to support the development and the internal mobility of our teammates within the bank. And I look forward to the dialogue today to share some of the things that we have in flight and what we're looking forward to in the future.
Thanks, Scott. I've also lived in Davidson before, so always like when you call that out.
A
Danny,
nice little town.
it's beautiful.
Yes, awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Danny Neubauer. As you can hear from my last name and my accent, I am from Texas. No, I'm just kidding. I'm from Europe. I'm from Zurich, Switzerland. At the moment, I grew up in Germany and then lived in London. And for the last 13 years, I live in Switzerland. I also got my Swiss passport now, which is very nice. But originally, I'm from Germany. In regards to HR, I started my career with Deutsche Bank in HR in Frankfurt, and worked then in London. Worked then for HSBC and Zurich Insurance. In Switzerland, and moved to UBS 9 years ago. I started there as the global head talent development and culture for global wealth management, being responsible for 35,000 employees when it comes to talent and leadership development and also all the culture initiatives. Have moved in 2023 when we acquired Credit Suisse, which was one of the biggest financial transactions so far, into the HR business partner role, and covered wealth management LATAM, and also COO front to back digitization with a main focus on AI. So helped to build up in the last years to build up our AI team in wealth management from actually 12 people to around 180 at the moment. So we have grown massively on that side in Singapore, the United States, and Switzerland. And as of 2 weeks ago, I'm now responsible for Global FIM, which are the financial intermediaries. I'm responsible for ultra high network and net wealth, and for in Switzerland. So this is focusing on our billionaires actually in Switzerland, or multimillionaires that we have. And I'm also responsible now for all the key talent programs that are responsible, or that are in place to develop high potentials into senior leadership roles at UBS. Very proud and very happy to be here, David, today, also together with Scott. Very much value Brandon Hall Group, have been multiple participating, and very proud to have won several prizes, especially gold, which is always important. So thank you for that. But I hope you didn't give it to me because I'm running here the sessions, but because the programs were really strong. So thank you again for having me today.
Of course. Two people with a great background on the industry. And then, as Danny last said, two people who desire nothing short of gold in our HCM Excellence Awards. I know you both strive for that. And I know Scott has been keeping score on the awards that he's won over the years. So before we jump into the discussion, I wanted to kind of frame up this report and give a little bit of context. So this came out of a combination of Brandon Hall Group's research and conversations with our Excellence Council across financial services. So you can see on the report cover, there's a couple of different people that were interviewed and asked questions about the state of banking and financial services. And we asked some, pretty simple set of questions, in my opinion. What are the biggest workforce challenges right now in banking and finance? Where are things starting to break down? And what actually needs to change to go forward? So you'll see that throughout the report. And what made this particularly valuable was that it wasn't theoretical. These are perspectives from people dealing with these issues day in and day out in very complex environments. as you heard from the intros by both of these are people that certainly know what they're doing in the banking and finance industry. So I was able to contribute some content as well. So on the next slide, there were some things that I found as I looked through the different conversations, some themes that I found, and then I'm going to be bringing those up to Danny and Scott as we go through. But some trends that I saw were first, workforce capability is showing up more directly and how decisions are being made across the organization. There's real tension between AI and human judgment. We were actually talking about this before the webinar got started. In many cases, the judgment is becoming more important, certainly not less, like you might hear in the newspaper. And then we're seeing questions around how workforce readiness is evaluated. In some cases, still very compliance driven, and others where are starting to shift. So skills are changing very quickly, which is putting pressure on the traditional hiring models and pushing more focus towards internal mobility, which we heard from both of these gentlemen. So rather than go through each of the research pieces that we identified from Brandon Hall Group, I'm going to drop a link in the chat now. That way you can download the full report and see some of the other Excellence Council members that contributed. But since we have such a great panel here, I'm going to jump into the first question for the team. So in financial services, decisions don't just need to be right, they need to be consistent and explainable across the organization. So how is workforce capability showing up in how decisions are made day to day?
Scott, do you want to start?
I can start. That's fine. I was like, which way are we going to go? So ultimately, when it comes to decision making within our organization, we're adjusting some of our decision making models from the standpoint that we're accustomed to standard evaluation, standard practices in our evaluation, but yet now we're using AI in order to inform that, but yet still keeping the final decisions and the final evaluations in the hands of our people. I see in our ranks more of a bottom-up decision-making flow, to where leaders are truly looking for those that are performing the work and performing the duties to provide guidance and direction to the organization. So our workforce, especially within the academy at Bank of America, is a true owner of our function and guiding the direction of our function that supports the overall organization. Each one of the academies that support our major lines of business relate to the business priorities. They are the closest to the business that we're serving, and they can help drive the overall enterprise centralized function.
Danny, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think very similar to what Scott said, right? If we look at the into how decisions are made now across overall the organizations, right? And also to explain stuff, of course, as you explained, we're using AI to inform. We're using AI as a baseline. If I just look at our year-end process, which is amazing, at UBS, you can collect all the check-ins, as we call it. So throughout the year, we're collecting check-ins with our employees. Then the system automatically provides you a year-end template, which gives you all the ideas, but still it doesn't rate you, right? It's still in the hand of our employees and our line managers to make a decision. And then line managers need to adjust it by at least changing 20% of what was written up by AI in a very personal way. And this is kind of where I think we're heading to. So decisions generally are still being in employees and line managers' hands, right? I think the big question is at the end of the day, based on what? And I think the whole thing about going away from I think everyone started with data-driven decision making even more. Now we have AI, which is supporting on that side even more and bringing it more together. But the ultimate decision making is still clearly with our employees and line managers overall, right?
Yeah, I think that leads well into the next question. So I won't I won't beat around the bush here, though. In a regulated environment, human judgment often becomes part of the control layer, especially with AI in the mix. So, kind of as we were talking about in the last question, how are you thinking about the balance between AI and human judgment right now? Danny, you want to answer?
Yeah, I mean, we discussed it a little bit before everyone joined here, right? When we had a little bit of a pre-exchange, which I truly appreciated. The reality is AI is here, right? And it's most likely the biggest game changer after the internet or the invention of the internet, right? Everyone also thought, oh, the internet is not going to be that big. The reality is, AI is, I think, even now just at the beginning. If you look into automation, right? Especially from an HR point of view. Over 60% of all our requests at the moment from our employees are going into a chat box, right? Where AI is going to reply based on all the knowledge that we have in the organization with the right answer. Now, when we look into onboarding, we had the discussion as well, right? Especially if you look at customers and clients, one of the major focus areas will be about how can we onboard clients way faster into an organization. And in the future, the reality will also be how we go on board employees also even faster, right? Giving them the right tools at the right time to make sure that they're efficient and that they hit the break even more. So these are things that are happening. And where no human judgment, at least at this point of time, is needed. Now, human judgment is becoming even more important when it's getting critical, right? There's some stuff that I believe are non-critical. If you ask, for example, what's my holiday balance, then of course it's okay if you would like to get the right number that you have 12 holidays instead of 25, right? So you're not overspending holidays. So I think that there might be an error that is acceptable just using AI, but where AI needs to get human judgment is really when we talk about people. And this is a little bit where I think we have a human-centered, where we need to talk about a human-centered approach, if you ask me. Um, and I always call it hair, right? Put AI into HR. It's kind of the hair approach. I don't have any, but talking about this one is bringing human centricity into the AI landscape. So, yeah, and for example, is an amazing example. If you just take the verbatim that we have in the systems, right? And people would assume that this is an outstanding performance. That's great, but the system doesn't know how does my colleague perform against the same metrics, right? Am I now above? Am I below? Am I more successful? Am I less successful? And the only person that would know that at that point of time still yet is the line manager, unless we really build in also other data points that are all coming together. But as I said in the beginning, we're just in the beginning of building up AI. And at UBS, we're very advanced, I must admit, and I'm very proud of that, that AI is really part of our entire journey. But human judgment is mostly critical when we really talk about people. Another very good example is talent cycle, right? Which we're just all in. In case you're in learning and development or if you're an HR business partner, it's normally the time of the year when you need to identify your top talents. Now, of course, you can run AI over this and you can say, okay, who was exceeding this year? Who had a 5-point rating on a 5-point scale in the last 3 years or top talents, etc., etc. But at the end of the day, you need to have someone who's also reading between the lines where AI still can't go into, which is the emotional intelligence piece, right? Understanding really who are these people? Do they have the capacity, the capability to do even more? And this is where I think AI and human judgment need to be close partners for success in the future. So I hope that makes sense, but would be interested to hear Scott's view on that one as well.
Yeah, I would completely agree. And when it comes to Bank of America, we started our journey and our focus on AI in the way we serve our clients externally, putting the client first with the development of Erica. Erica, I was just trying to look on our internal internet site to see we celebrated a milestone of something like 5 billion interactions with Erica in the way we serve our client. taking that same technology team that built Erica, building our own AI internally, we built Erica for employees. So as Danny was talking about the service set to the employee base, we can serve our employees through those transactional capabilities with our employees. We're now in the journey in which we're enabling work across the entire enterprise globally. And when I think about the way we're enabling work, because my role is taking strategy and bringing it to life through execution and enablement, we look at it in layers. So we're working with enterprise-wide pre-approved platforms. So the MS365 suite, Copilot, the multiple products of Copilot, implementing them with controls in place, really leveraging those vetted, approved, secured large language models. Then we're also working with some specialty niche providers in which they have cultivated their own AI, and we're running that AI through our internal model risk management, governance, approvals, monitoring, maintenance cycles, so that we can utilize specialty models for unique business cases. We have a couple of those coming into the academy that we're really excited about, that will probably show up in Brandon Hall Awards applications coming down the pike. But ultimately, we're also looking at the way our employee base uses AI, because we've provided those tools and capabilities, but yet we are a highly regulated industry. And we are concerned about the use of AI overtaking policies, practices, both regulatory policies and practices from the outside in, as well as our own internal. We are very heavily focused on prompting, prompt education. And what we're looking at is really prompting through three key lenses: individualized prompting, prompting that you're doing just in the everyday flow of work, shared prompts, those heavily structured prompts that are designed to yield like results regardless of the prompt user. As you can imagine, brand is incredibly important to Bank of America. So we're currently experimenting with and finalizing some brand prompts that are generating Bank of America specific brand compliant images in order to integrate into learning materials. And then finally, governed prompts. Those prompts that we are making widely accessible and available to our employees, prompts that are very unique to business circumstances for the businesses that are being used. And those governed prompts are being heavily scrutinized, tested, and reviewed to make sure that they are truly yielding common, consistent outcomes, regardless of the user, that they are tapping into trusted, tried, true, and authorized data sources externally and internally, depending on the nature. So we're, instead of kind of painting with the broad brush, we're breaking it down into specialized use cases. The head of the academy, Bernard Hampton, who has spoken at the HCM conference the last couple of years in South Florida, I like the step he took, that as we started our journey, we were talking about human in the loop, human in the loop, human in the loop. And he adjusted the phrase slightly to human in the lead, which I like, because ultimately that then puts the human in first chair, AI in the second chair, instead of having people look at AI as, hey, that's the horse that's going to lead me to water. Instead, I'm going to be the one that finds the water and brings the horse with me. We're really driving the prompting capabilities to help people understand that Copilot is not just Google on steroids. You've got a greater deal of capability that comes along with that. So we are internally building prompting communities of practices. We are building it's in the infancy, Prompt HQ, that will be centralizing vetted, approved, governed prompts that are accessible to the organization. And we are seeing an awful lot of grassroots competition, where there are prompting challenges, prompting Olympics, you name it, where people are really trying to put some fun around the use of the technology and the outcomes that it provides. And that way they have some type of measurable business impact and outcomes that come along with the prompting, in order to have something to hang their hat on for the outcome of the prompt. So we have many layers in operation, not only within the academy, but the way the academy is supporting our larger people organization, as well as our line of business clients.
Thank you, Scott. Those are really helpful ways that organizations can line up their capability within the organization.
Mhm.
Danny, I would love to hear if you have any additional feedback based on Scott's conversation around what they're doing. Or I would love maybe for you to circle back to some of the emotional intelligence that you said that you're trying to build out to balance that AI and HI. Any of those capability buildings that you're focusing on that side, or respond to some of Scott's initiatives.
I think if you look into the learning development space at the moment, right, our main focus, I would say at the moment is really around two things, right? One is AI. So there's a full AI journey where people truly need to understand what is AI and how can you use it, right? And I think this is really fundamental to understand also then the human-centric part that we're going to talk about in a second. Because if you don't understand, what is AI and how can AI help you and what are the prompts that also Scott just share with you, right, that are helping you to gain insights and value, it's becoming very, very difficult. So there are different journeys also that we have, right? We have employee journeys, we have line manager journeys, we have senior executive journeys where we partner up with a university, which is well known, and we have courses around it. So we had a whole team in the last 2 years focusing only on this one. And one of our key ambitions is that everyone becomes a AI citizen, right? That is kind of how we call it. At the same time, um, you need to focus again on the human centricity, right? As I said before, if you're not human centric and you don't put the human at the center of everything that you do, it's going to become very difficult because the reality is any organization in this world still consists out of people that you need to manage. And these people have feelings, these people have emotions, these people have wishes, they have desires, etc. And it's ultimately key if you look into the interaction of people that there's a lot of things happening around it, right? It starts from conflict. It starts from not having trust with each other. It has a starting point of how do we communicate with each other? How do we work together as a team? How do we collaborate? So if you take all that into consideration, then the human-centric approach is even getting more important because without the human centricity and without focusing on people and this emotional intelligence, it's impossible to manage people. At the end of the day, if you really play it through, I have two boys, right? 10 and 12. Both are still going to school. Sometimes I wake up in the morning and I ask myself, why do I send them to school? Because the reality is, right, will there be in 5 to 10 years a possibility that my kid will have a chip in their head where they have all the knowledge, etc., instead of having it on our mobile devices, just in their head? Right? Question of ethics. However, would it not be much more important for them to understand how do I interact with people? How do I solve problems? How do I go into social interactions? I think this is a skill that is truly much more important now than ever, and that's where I think these two things are coming together, and where you need to have both at one point of time, right? You need to make sure that AI is supporting you as a human being to take the right decisions. And I would be very surprised if any of our participants today has never used ChatGPT, right? I'm sure you're using it on a regular base. And if, I just read an article the other day that ChatGPT has become the most successful coach in the world because it has more clients than any executive coach in the world accumulated, right? It's the first time that we're using an AI, a large language model to solve our personal problems. And this is a little bit where we're heading to as human beings. And that's why it's so important to make sure that we don't forget the human centric side and to make sure that we're still dealing with people. I hope that answers, David.
Great.
But if you want, we,
Yeah.
we, we can go on.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you both. Very, very interesting and practical, both of you. Um, Obviously, with coming from the industry that you're in and an increased focus on how decisions are made and documented, are you seeing any shift in how regulators think about workforce readiness, or is this still largely compliance driven?
I think if you want, I can start. I think there are two things. I think especially in our industry, compliance is key, right? And we're we're highly regulated, as Scott said. We have a global footprint in Asia. We have a global footprint in the US and in EMEA and in Switzerland. We are by far the global wealth manager in the world, which means that every second billionaire is a client of UBS. Of course, we are highly compliance driven, and the whole risk compliance attitude is a main focus in everything that we do, and it will continue. But that's a little bit the regulation piece that we really need to work with, and that we want to work for also in the future, because we want to demonstrate that we can also fulfill all the needs that are important, right? At the same time, if you look at workforce readiness, yes, they want to understand, how do we invest in our talents? How do we make sure that they're capable to do whatever we have? I mean, if you're running businesses in, especially in this organization, and we just went through a financial crisis, once in 2007, in 2008, we saw a lot of shocks in the last couple of weeks because of geopolitical impact, right? You want to make sure that you have the right people at the right place at the right time, and who really know what they're talking about. So we can't afford that. We are losing the huge discussions at the moment, specifically here after our huge acquisition of Credit Suisse, which was the global transaction in the financial industry ever, to ensure that, too big to fail is not going to hit back, right? We need to make sure that, you know, banks and any financial industries are not being bailed out by the governments, by the state, making sure that whatever we do is compliant, and that we try to create a future which helps industries, which then means individuals and families, to ensure that they can create the wealth that is needed to protect their lives for the future. So this is a little bit where I see this going at the moment.
Scott, anything to add on the
Yeah,
compliance side?
I'd actually agree with Danny and your comment prior to the call and now around too big to fail. It resonates with me because ultimately we want to keep, from a regulatory perspective, keep talking about too big to fail. However, each time we have a challenge, like the challenge with Credit Suisse, it's the big that can actually save the industry and be able to take on the, with big comes strength. But that same thing goes from a regulatory perspective. We've got to stay laser focused. For us, what I've been tracking and watching with our global risk partners and our legal partners is somewhat of a chicken or the egg analysis, is what I'm seeing, is from the standpoint that with the implementation of AI and advancement of the workforce, the laws and legal suits are coming in of new types, natures, and sources, where we then have to look at, are the regulations proactively getting in front of those, or are they reactively coming as a result of the lawsuits that are coming through? And that can be anywhere from the way we structure our businesses and the products and services we offer to our clients, even to the point of, I'm currently pacing and watching legal reviews around intellectual property rights violations against learning content creation, where intellectual property was captured by AI, and the originators are of the training content, or the providers of the training content, didn't fully source and know where it came from. So by extension, there's a perception that they violated the law. Even a friend of mine in my network is an author, and he and his wife, in a couple of the books they co-authored, had their intellectual property captured via AI. So we are in a time in which our policies and our regulations and our laws are not necessarily keeping pace with the evolution of the technology, the capability, and the resourcing that we have going on. So it gives us a chance to run fast, but still not be able to catch up, in my personal opinion. And I think the workforce at every level is experiencing a pain point as a result of that.
Great points from both of you. And looking at some of the conversations we've already had thus far, talking about each of you building your own AI and machine learning within your organization to protect some of that. Making sure that the content that's typed into the chat isn't leaking, isn't getting out, those types of things. Making sure we're grabbing content from the inside and not external sources. And then when you go to build out your learning material or whatever it is, it's safeguarded and sourced properly. So I love that. Another thing I heard is talking about having the right people, the right place, the right time. And that to me leads into the hiring versus internal mobility. So, with how quickly skills are changing, as Danny mentioned, maybe having a chip in your head, are you finding that external hiring can keep up, or are we relying more on that internal mobility piece?
Scott, you want to go first because I did the last two, and then I give you my
Okay.
view.
Be happy to. So from an external hiring perspective, over the last several years, while we are openly hiring all year long for dedicated and specialized roles, when it comes to large volume or dedicated new hire, new to career roles, we have a very deliberate campus hiring strategy within the organization to where we onboard a very dominant percentage of our external hires during the summer months as those graduates are coming out of college. And as we've looked at our campus onboarding and initial education practices over the last couple of years, we've seen it somewhat become more of a 360 education process because our experts in our businesses, as they're onboarding their new talent, teaching them about the bank, the business, our client base, our product set, et cetera, they are also learning from the new hires that are coming in directly out of school that don't have the practical business experience, but they do have the up to date new experiences of the technology and the tools and the resources from the outside in. Because as a regulated industry, we're a little slow to adopt and implement sometimes because we have to put them in control. So they come in with a much greater open access to tools and resources. So we do have that dedicated focus relative to bringing those new hires in during the summer into each one of the businesses, really the early career hires. When it comes to the mid to late career, we do still hire externally. However, with the identification of transferable skills, really looking at the organization as a whole, the portability of talent from one of our businesses across another, from taking into account functional roles that translate and business acumen that can just be converted, we still have a very heavy focus on internal mobility. And at that point in time, it becomes the internal mobility, and the focus on that then turns into the focus on continued retention and growth of your current talent set. So the ecosystem truly does stay in operation. And if we're dropping the ball or lightening the pressure on any one of those levers, the whole kind of balance becomes unstable. So I don't think it's a matter of external versus internal. I think it's a matter of the right mechanism for the right role for the right business at the right time. And that's where the science of modeling meets the art of decision making. And in this case, it's still in the hands of the humans with some input from AI, but ultimately looking at who our folks are. And prior to the call, Danny, you were talking about your internal my career, which I was like, I want to hear more because we're not there yet. And I think that's ultimately going to be a key enabler to internal mobility.
Yeah, I think the question here, right, around make or buy is a super interesting one, right? Because as you wrote, David, the question is how quickly do skills truly develop, right? I mean, I remember 3 years ago, 4 years ago, everyone told us you need to learn Python, right? You need to be an expert in programming and everything. And, if you look at the reaction of Scott, you know exactly, that this is maybe over, because if you use AI and you just tell them, give me, write me a code on this and this and put it into Python, and then, we have a solution, we're done. The big question at the end of the day is, what is truly changing, right, at the moment, when we talk about skills. Um, one key skill clearly is, the whole usage of AI, which I think is at this point of time the biggest change, right, that we have, and which is fundamental, I think, not only for our organizations, but even for societies. Now, if you look at everything else or the other skills, and David knows that when I was on the panel in 2023, I said skills are dead, right? Let's focus on mindsets, because that's the one that is going to change everything. If you look into skills, right, at the end of the day, client centricity doesn't really change. Communication skills don't really change. Um, Leadership skills, you can always argue, is the different way to look into leadership. We went from servant leadership, right? We went to transactional leadership, to transformational leadership, to servant leadership, and we're still not there, right? So at the end of the day, yes, there are some things that are changing, but the reality is the majority, we're not going to reinvent the world, unless we're going to Mars at one point of time, which I heard someone is planning at the moment to move people there, but unfortunately they can't come back. Now, if you look into hiring or developing it internally, um, clearly, if this is your approach to think about, what can fundamentally truly change, then of course internal mobility makes a lot of sense. And we have built up a huge internal mobility team using My Career, right? My Career is kind of our internal LinkedIn, that we have built up, where you're going to define your entire career way, where you have worked, which experiences you have gained, but you're also going to list up all the skills. Now, our recruiters can and should, always first go internally, because again, I think in an organization of 100,000 employees that we have, there needs to be at least one person who's suitable to fill the gap. However, the only problem that we will have is, fresh ideas from the outside, because otherwise you're just constantly in your own juice, and that's why it's nice to get, insights from the outside. Um, but if you really look into this one, I think, we need to focus on both. However, our main focus clearly at the moment is internal, because we have done a huge acquisition, which always means redundancies, which always means synergies. If take HR, there was an HR business partner who did exactly the same job on the other side, and you don't need two, you just need one. And then the question is, how do you find the right people at the right time? So I think we went through a massive change in the last 3 years, a huge transformation and culture change. We are going into a world of growth now, which I'm very proud of and we're very much looking forward to. And this is now the question, do we have the right hunger, I would say. And this is again is more mindset than skill, right? Because hunger you can't learn. Either you're hungry or you're not hungry. Either you're laser focused on bringing in more or not. Uh, yes, you of course I can try to be someone much more hunter focused, etc. But sometimes it's just easier to go out. So at the end of the day, um, I think there's a good mix. However, our main focus at the moment is trying to use our internal talents that we have from both sides, and to bring them into one platform and to outbeat everyone, and to make sure that our share price is going up at one point of time, then massively in the same direction as our American competitors.
Great. And want to shift gears a little bit. Both of your organizations and the banking and financial industry has a lot of customer facing professionals in them. That also creates hierarchy and management layers that some other industries don't have to play with as much. But even the manager has some pretty big task of having the conversation with their employee, effectively translating policy, risk, and strategy into really day-to-day decision making. So looking at the managers, you don't have to talk about your organization specifically, but in general in our industry, do you see that layer as more of a strength right now, or is it a vulnerability?
From my point of view, again, as always, it depends. I know that's a lawyer answer, but it is really true, right? The management decides at the end of the day quite a lot of stuff, right? They're responsible in the culture that you're having in your mini teams. Yeah, they're responsible about the way you do stuff around here, etc. Now, I think if you would have asked me 10 years ago, when I really started to be more or less, almost 10 years in the leadership development area, I would have said, leaders should only lead. And they should truly only lead, nothing else. The reality is that it has become so complex, right? Of being human centric, as you said, right? From regular check-ins, regular one-to-ones, um, regular feedback, coaching, the whole thing of leaders as a coach, which is going into the direction of, trying to move the servant leadership into the world of leaders as coaches. It's super difficult. Now, if you look at any organization, and we discussed that a little bit before, right? You start normally as a teller and you end up as a CEO in the past, right? If you go back 80 years ago, this was your career path. Now, nobody ever told the teller on how to lead, right? Because you're an individual contributor. Now, if you were super successful in the past, we made you a manager because we said, that's your only possibility to earn more money, right? So we give you a higher rank, we give you a higher responsibility, we let you lead people. The problem that we saw in any organization I worked with is we had partially absolutely the wrong people in the right roles, right? Because we believe that someone who is a very strong performer can also be an amazing leader, but that's utterly BS. You should only move into these roles if you follow my credo that I always said at every leadership program, if you don't love people, don't lead. It's very simple. If you don't love people, don't lead. Um, and this is a little bit the challenge that I've seen in the past, right? That organizations are going down that route. Now, if I look into more and more organizations, I think we're all doing a much better job in preparing first line managers to become first line managers, right? In some organizations, there are assessments, in some organizations, there's true preparation, there's coaching, etc., etc. And if I look into the level of old bosses, and I remember I always share the story, when I started my career at Deutsche Bank in 2006, the head of HR was sitting on this huge leather chair, and the only thing that was missing was the music of the Godfather coming out of the radio, but he was sitting there like Godfather, and he was like, come closer. And I'm like, if we would do that nowadays with our Gen Z generation, they would say, you know what? Stay in your leather chair, have a nice day, etc. I think we've moved away from that. I think the leadership I see at the moment is much more open, is much more human centric. And is creating a huge impact, especially when it comes to culture. Because I think this is where the most important job of a manager today is to drive culture in an organization. And if they fail on this one, to have a culture of fear, for example, or a culture of anxiety, or a culture of not making mistakes, you haven't done your homework as an organization. And I think this is where we are very focused on, and where we have line manager effectiveness scores, and we try to really look into, how do you drive performance, how do you drive well-being, and how do you make sure actually that your people can perform.
Got anything to add on there?
I was just going to say it was interesting that you led with this answer as being it depends, Daniel, because I was the same way. My answer was it depends. It depends on what area of the organization, what level of the organization. And when I think about our organization and really break each business down, there's three key components: sales, service, and operations. And the role that the manager plays in each is very different. And the skills and capabilities that we need from each is very different. And one of the things that I see happening is and Danny was talking about, well, we went from servant leader to transactional leader to transitional leader, and we keep trying to make the same labeling and style and nature apply across the board, because oftentimes consistency means same versus like. And I think if we were to focus more on how we look at managers in a like fashion versus a same fashion in the way we cultivate them and expect them to perform is going to be different. As an example, looking at expanding span of control so that a manager can truly lead and manage only and allow the work to be done by others versus being a working manager, performing as well as leading. Um, One might be better in an area where the other isn't. So ultimately, in operations, if a manager is not a working manager, they can very quickly lose sight of what's happening day to day, what's important, where the pressure points are, and can end up creating a divide between themselves and their people because they are no longer relatable to how their people are experiencing their work. Sales is a little different because sales is more of the how, has the human centric, the EQ side versus the transactional tactical side. So I think ultimately, is it a strength or is it a vulnerability? It all depends on what area you're talking about, what level of the organization you're talking about, what the style and nature is of the individual in the role, and whether that aligns to the environmental need. Because unless you can match those factors up, it's going to be vulnerable. And then if you do match them up, it can be a strength.
I love the perspective that you both brought and covering, where managers are struggling the most and also what we can do to support them. So thank you both for your insights. And now kind of leading into the last question, and I think for me, it's the most exciting, looking ahead over the next 2 to 3 years, what do you think will differentiate institutions that get workforce readiness right and those that do not?
You want me to take
Scott, why
this
don't
one
you
first,
jump?
Danny?
Yeah.
I'll start. So, very simply, my personal conjecture is the organization that can focus on mastering, grow, and retain will excel. Because I believe as we look at generational shifts from the baby boomers that did focus on being corporate lifers to an incredibly transient workforce today, that puts a transient workforce puts an organization in a constant restart mode. So energy, effort, resources, people, dollars, time are all being invested in start again, start again, start again. Whereas if we are able to master the art of bring them in, provide them the start of their career, and provide them options and paths to their career, I believe people can stay within the same organization. There's many of my contemporaries that have been with Bank of America at my tenure or longer. And ultimately, what we look at it as we've worked under the same corporate tax identification number, but it has not been the same organization. It has not been the same client base. We have had the glorious luxury of an incredibly vibrant, ever changing, ever evolving career. And in some cases, that's environmental. Like for me, in the first half of my career, it was all about mergers and acquisitions, the way the corporation grew, expanded, and diversified. But in the second half of my career so far, it's been a matter of being able to take on those roles that allowed for the organic, innate change. And if we are able to manufacture that type of evolution, growth, and continued renewed excitement, people don't have to move. They don't have to go elsewhere. And we can gain the benefit of the intellectual capital that they maintain with us and just continue to layer on. So it layers on for them, layers on for the company, and we both benefit. So that's personally my conjecture. Grow and retain and be able to cultivate a stable workforce while giving them the exhilaration of growth, excitement, and advancement.
Right.
Yeah,
Danny, your thoughts?
I like it a lot. I think I would put it under the umbrella of make your make your workforce ready to understand there's constant change, right? I mean,
Be ready for
this,
what's next.
yes, I think if any organization that doesn't tell people, this is what you do today and this is what you're going to do tomorrow in the next 3 years, and this is exactly the same role, I think are going to be successful. I think organizations that will tell people, listen, we're all on this journey together. Yes, there will be new inventions coming. Yes, there will be new changes coming. There will be new technologies coming. There will be new opportunities for you coming. Um, will succeed. I think, again, if you look back 3 years ago, nobody would have talked about AI, right? Nobody would have said that UBS is having a center of excellence of AI and driving AI. Nobody would have thought that there will be something like ChatGPT and internal ChatGPT within UBS, right? And the reality it is. And if you prepare people and you're open and honest to say, listen, you don't need to be afraid, right? That you're losing your job, but you need to be very much sure that whatever you do in this organization might be something different. You might be moving from client onboarding, which will be replaced by AI, to something else where we need you much more, right? And Scott shared before, right? And or you shared it before, David, right? Into client education, for example, or
Mhm.
connecting, the platform, etc. I think this is I think this is key. I'm much more worried about, career path as we discussed before, right? How do we give juniors the opportunity to drive careers in an organization where entry jobs are most likely being taken by AI, unless you're a plumber? This is where AI is not going to replace you. But if you're in an organization and you talk about onboarding, HR, service centers, right? The typical questions where you started your career, right? Payroll, etc. I think there's a high likelihood this is going to be replaced by AI. And then you need to ask yourself, what does it mean for you in the future and how do organizations really build it up? So I think organizations, they think about preparing their workforce to be change open and to ensure and to think about how do we develop talents within an organization are those who are going to master and outbeat everyone else.
And Danny, I think to add on to that, helping the workforce to understand that sometimes the next step ask is seemingly the most unlikely or uncomfortable typically yields the greatest outcome and greatest expansion and growth. And not always will they see that on the front end, but they will certainly yield it and feel it on the back end.
Agreed.
Well, wonderful conversation. And to the audience that participated, our chat was a little quiet, which is okay. But when you log off, you're going to get a survey. If you have any questions for Danny or Scott, please feel free to write them in there. We'll surely get those to the right person. Also, would
Or
love to hear
connect
your
via
feedback.
LinkedIn,
Yes, connect via
right? Feel
LinkedIn.
free to connect via LinkedIn. Always,
Mhm.
always there. Always great.
Yeah. And we would also love for you to do the post survey. Tell us about this format. We wanted a more conversational format, which I really enjoyed learning from both of you. Hopefully, you all did as well. Would love to hear your feedback. Scott, Danny, thank you so much for your time and sharing your insights with us.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us. It was a pleasure.
It's a pleasure meeting you as well, Danny.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Have a lovely one. Cheers.